Okay, we're ready to start. Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to this Zoom session on the 2021 Where the Audiences Research. Ko Alana Kalafatailas, toko ingoa. I'm Head of Communications and Research at Irirangi Te Motu. Before we begin, just a quick rundown of how we're going to be running this session. Firstly, all your mics are off and will stay off, or it could get messy. If you've got a question, please pop it in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. Please don't use the chat function, use the Q&A function. That's the one we'll be looking at, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the presentation. Jeremy Todd's going to present the findings of the research in a moment. Many of you who've been following this research since the beginning will be familiar with Jeremy. He does this work with Glasshouse Consulting, and he's got about a 30-minute presentation. It's taking us through the key findings. It's not a page-by-page walkthrough of the full report. And you will find that full report on our website now. And if you're on our mailing list, you've probably just got it ping in your inbox as well. After Jeremy's presentation, our CEO, Cam Harland, has a few words, and then we're going to answer your questions. So over to you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Alana. Just sharing my screen. Hopefully that's all up and running for you now. Good morning, everybody. My name's Jeremy Todd, and I'm really pleased to be showing you a summary of the results of the 2021 Where Are the Audiences study. As Alana mentioned, we'll just be taking you through the main findings in the research. It'll take about 30 minutes, but by the end, I hope you'll have a really good picture of audiences' daily behaviour in 2021 and also how that's changing over time. We'll also address any concerns that the 2020 study was significantly anomalous due to the country being at COVID-19 levels 1 and 2 during the survey period. And lastly, everything I show you today is included in the report and largely in the same format as I'm showing you today as well. And that will be available for download at the end of the presentation. So before we get into the results, I just want to quickly talk about exactly how we conducted the study to make sure that you have confidence that the findings I'm showing you are accurate. Now, the most important factor driving the design is to make sure that we have accurate comparability to all the previous studies. So the methodology and largely all of the questions are the same as in all previous studies. So we interviewed 1,400 New Zealanders aged 15 and over. 800 of those was by telephone using random digit dialing, and 600 was online in homes without a landline. And the maximum margin for error of that total sample is plus or minus 2.6%. So we have increased the proportion of online interviews in 2021 to reflect the declining incidence of landlines in homes. And that's based on Nielsen's CMI data as at the end of 2020. The sample is stratified by region to make sure we're interviewing across the country as per the population, and we had minimum quotas in place on males and youth and ethnic groups to make sure we had robust subsamples of those key audiences. And then finally, the sample was post-weighted to match the total New Zealand population. So as in previous years, the key aspect of the study is to ask respondents about what they did yesterday within specific time periods between 6 AM and midnight. So we don't ask them about a typical day, and we don't ask them to recall their behaviour over an extended period of time, such as a week. So in this way, respondents are able to recall actual recent behaviour across all types of media. So what I'm presenting today is a robust and representative single source picture of all media consumption on a daily basis, and one that can be compared to all the previous 4 studies. Now, there will be differences in the results I'm showing you today compared to the market currencies such as TV ratings and the radio survey and online analytics. And that's because the methodologies of all of these different sources are so different that they do produce slightly different results. But I would hope that the trends we're showing are consistent. So let's just quickly talk about last year's study and the potential impact of COVID-19 on those COVID-19 levels 1 and 2 on those results. So we acknowledge there has been discussion about whether that study was anomalous due to unique market conditions and audience behaviour. And the study was delayed from its normal survey period to a period, because it's a normal survey period, we're at COVID levels 3 and 4. And we delayed it to when we were at levels 1 and 2. So it started when we were at level 2 and it continued when we moved into level 1. And yes, we can see some impact of those conditions on audience behaviour, but you'll see from this presentation that impact was minor. So the impact can be mostly seen in slightly increased audience sizes and slightly increased time spent viewing of some digital media. So some digital media, and certainly not all, received a slight boost in audience sizes and time spent viewing in 2020, and that's dropped back slightly again in 2021. And in particular, that impact can be seen in music streaming, online gaming, and the on-demand audiences. And in addition, we saw some specific content providers show a slight drop in audience in 2020, which is then at least partially recovered in 2021. And in particular, that can be seen for some radio stations and for the aggregated Sky Sport channels. Overall, though, these impacts are minor, and you'll see for yourselves that they are quite minor and often within the margin for error. So most of the trend lines I'm about to show you don't show any of these effects and actually show consistent trends over time. So based on the 2021 results, we continue to be confident that the audiences study continues to represent accurately New Zealand's daily audience behaviour. There are two other changes to note. One is, this is the first time we've conducted the study 12 months after the previous one. It's normally a 2-year gap. So we have adjusted the charts to account for that change so that the time scale and all the trend lines that I'll show you is on the same scale. And perhaps more importantly, we have changed the way we measure online video in 2021 to reflect market conditions and audience behavior. So we've now split online video into 2 categories, and I think it's important for me to read out what those categories are. So we split them into an overseas and a New Zealand based. So the first one being watching video online using an overseas site or app like YouTube, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, or TikTok. And also watching video online using a New Zealand site or app like New Zealand Herald, Watch Me Stuff, Play Stuff, Radio New Zealand, the Coconut NZN Screen, or the Spinoff. So we've not only split it out, but we've also added a significant number of online video providers to both categories. And it's changed the choices that were available to respondents when they answered this question about what sites they used yesterday. Note also that we're still reporting an overall online video audience, and that is a net figure of those 2 categories. And we also, based on the results, very confident that that is an accurate reflection of that overall online video category and consistent with previous studies. So let's get into the 2021 results. First of all, I'm just going to quickly take you through the overall findings, the key insights, the things we want you to take away from today, and then just quickly show you the evidence to support those findings. So first of all, in 2021, online video narrowly reaches than most New Zealanders each day. So we talked about 2020 being the crossover point between digital media attracting a bigger audience than traditional media overall, and that has proven to be the case. But SVOD and podcasts are actually the only media to have grown their daily audience sizes in the last 12 months. So for most media, the audience watching each day is stable compared to 2020 or has declined slightly, and that includes online video. So the reason that online video now attracts the biggest audience each day is actually due to the ongoing slight decline of the TV audience. However, New Zealanders continue to spend significantly more time watching TV than using any other media, but that gap to other media is starting to close. So New Zealanders continue to be highly engaged by TV and watch an average of nearly 2 hours of linear TV each day. So while media use, of course, changes over the course of the day, with traditional media still attracting the biggest audiences in some key zones. So while digital media attracts the biggest audience overall, the relative appeal of different media increases and decreases over the course of the day, and there's still important zones of the day where traditional media attracts the biggest audience. Of course, media consumption changes amongst different audiences, and for some audiences, digital media is already dominant over traditional media, and there continues to be 3 generations of media users. The younger generation, 15 to 39s, where digital media dominates, the middle generation, 40 to 59s, who demonstrate the widest use of digital and traditional media consumption, and the older generation, 60-plus-year-olds, where traditional media dominates and digital is not growing. So there are other audiences beyond that also demonstrate different media behavior, including Asian and Pacific audiences. And in 2021, we're also seeing increased differences on a socioeconomic basis. Now, all of those differences and influences on behavior are discussed in the full report, but for today, we'll be focusing just on the age and life stage effects. So most of the biggest media providers are now digital, although Netflix is the only provider to have actually grown its audience in the last 12 months. So as per media consumption overall, 2020 has proved to be the crossover point, with most of the biggest providers that attract the biggest audiences now being digital, and also similar to media overall. Most providers have actually not grown their audience in the last 12 months, with the notable exception of Netflix. Most types of media now have strong market leaders and long tails of smaller providers, and the exception being radio, where there continues to be really close competition for listeners. And we'll quickly show you a breakdown of the main providers in each media category, and also just quickly look at how COVID-19 levels 1 and 2 may have affected some of those providers, if they have at all. TVNZ News is the most widely used and the most trusted source of news amongst New Zealanders, and the Herald, Stuff and Radio New Zealand are equally second most trusted. Now, we've adjusted this question from 2020 to broaden out from just sources of news during COVID-19 to be sources of news overall, and we'll continue to measure that over time. So first of all, let's have a look at the overall daily audiences using each media and also how that is changing over time. So in 2021, online video now attracts the biggest daily audience very narrowly over TV. So 6 in 10, or nearly 6 in 10 New Zealanders watch online video each day, and that compares to slightly less than this who watch TV each day. The second tier of media is SVOD, broadcast radio, and streamed music. SVOD narrowly reaches more New Zealanders each day than radio, but each of these reach about 1 in 2 New Zealanders each day, and 4 in 10 listen to streamed music each day. The third tier, online gaming, TV viewing via Sky TV, and TV viewing via free-to-air platform, each of which reach about 1/3 of New Zealanders each day. Now, it's important to note that when we refer to TV free-to-air or TV pay, we're talking about the platform via which New Zealanders are watching TV. So for instance, in the case of TV pay, they may be watching free-to-air content, but via the Sky platform. And there's a note on these charts and also in the charts on the report to that effect. So below that, newspapers and on-demand reach about 1 in 4 New Zealanders each day. And music on physical formats, magazines and podcasts are used by between 10 and 13% of New Zealanders each day. So this chart summarizes the daily reach of different media in 2021. But now let's look at how audience behavior is changing over time. So to summarize the changes, I'll show you the daily reach of each media from all the studies since 2014 amongst all New Zealanders, starting with the trend lines for traditional media. So these trend lines show that the daily reach of all traditional media has continued to decline since 2020, and at largely the same rate as in previous studies, with the exception of the audience listening to music on physical formats, which has actually declined at a slightly higher rate. Another point to note is that this is the first time we've seen the audience watching TV via a free-to-air platform being slightly larger than the audience watching via a pay TV platform. Now, the differences between 32 and 31% are not statistically significant, excuse me, but they can be seen as part of a longer ongoing trend. And note this, in this study, we're measuring that 30% of New Zealanders have access to Sky TV, and that's down from 33% in 2020. And lastly, it's trends like this, on slides like this, that give us confidence that the 2020 results were not strongly anomalous or significantly impacted by COVID-19 levels 1 and 2. So now I'll add digital media to this chart one by one, starting with the daily reach of online video. So the audience watching online video each day is stable since 2020. And so the reason, as I said before, that it now reaches the largest audience each day is actually because of that slight ongoing decline of the TV audience. SVOD, however, has continued to grow its audience steadily since 2020 and now reaches slightly more than 1 in 2 New Zealanders each day. Music streaming has declined slightly since 2020 and now reaching 4 in 10 New Zealanders each day. Now, this trend line here for music streaming is an example of the slight impact of COVID-19 levels 1 and 2 on audience behavior. So we saw a slightly bigger than perhaps than expected increase in 2020, and it's slightly fallen back in 2021. So online gaming is showing a similar impact, and it's quite hard to see. It's the grey line. I'll take it off, put it back on again. So you can see that it's fallen from 36% reach in 2020 to 32% in 2021. And on-demand is the other media that's showing that potential impact of increased use during COVID-19 levels 1 and 2, and then a slight decline in 2021. It now reaches 1 in 4 New Zealanders each day. And lastly, the audience listening to podcasts each day has increased in 2021 to 13%. So it's charts like this and trend lines like this that give us the confidence that the 2020 results were not strongly anomalous. Yes, there are some media showing a slight increase in audience in 2020 that's now declined, but the overall conclusions that we drew last year would not have changed as a result. So let's now look at the time New Zealanders dedicate to each media each day, and in particular show how TV continues to engage New Zealanders more than any other media. So we've created a new way of looking at audience overall behaviour and how New Zealanders choose to dedicate their time. So on this chart, we'll position each media on the basis of the average minutes per day that New Zealanders spend using each media, and that's represented by the vertical axis, and then the daily reach of each media, which is summarised by the horizontal axis. So there's TV. And so New Zealanders continue to dedicate the most time to TV each day, slightly less than 2 hours per day at 118 minutes. There's a significant gap down to the next tier of media types in terms of the time we spend using them each day. So on average, New Zealanders watch SVOD slightly less than 1.5 hours per day, and we listen to the radio for an average of 74 minutes per day and watch online video for an average of 70 minutes per day. Below this, New Zealanders spend an average of 49 minutes listening to streamed music each day and 41 minutes playing online gaming. Below this, New Zealanders spend an average of 23 minutes watching on demand each day and 12 minutes listening to music on physical formats or listening to podcasts. So this chart shows that while online video narrowly attracts the biggest audience each day, New Zealanders continue to dedicate significantly more time to watching linear TV than any other media. Now let's look at what's happening though to time spent viewing over time. So while we continue to watch TV significantly more than using any other media, that time has continued to decline down to 118 minutes per day. And that was down from 156 minutes in 2018. This is due to declines in viewing via both pay TV and on a free-to-air platform. And in addition, the time New Zealanders spend listening to the radio and to music on physical formats has continued to slowly decline. And that's at the same rate as we've been measuring in previous studies. So SVOD is the media we dedicate the second most time to, but this has declined slightly in the last 12 months. And this may again be an example of a potential impact of COVID-19 levels 1 and 2 on behaviour, whereby we saw a slightly bigger than expected increase in time spent watching SVOD in 2020, and that's now slightly declined in 2021. But it does remain significantly higher than 2018. So throughout the data in the report, there is evidence that COVID-19 levels 1 and 2 perhaps had a bigger influence on the time we spent using some media as opposed to increasing media audience sizes on some media. But online video doesn't show that same impact. So online video has continued to increase at a steady rate over the last 12 months, just up to 70 minutes per day. Conversely, music streaming, online gaming, and on-demand show declines in the time New Zealanders spend using each of them since 2020. And it may indicate that these media also show a slight boost in time spent in 2020, which has now declined in 2021. So again, it's that music streaming, online gaming, and on-demand that shows that impact. So now let's look at how media changes over the course of the day, because there are still some zones where traditional media attracts the biggest audiences. So we asked people about the media they used yesterday in 5 different time zones, and those time zones are along the bottom of this chart. So that means we can show how the overall pattern of audience reach changes over the course of a day. This first line shows the audience reach of online video at different times of the day. So approximately 4 in 10 New Zealanders watch online video between 6 AM and 6 PM, and it's the most popular media during across the daytime hours. After this, its audience size drops, but as you'll see, online video continues to attract at least the second biggest audience across the evening. So broadcast radio attracts the second biggest audience between 6 AM and 6 PM, reaching approximately 1 in 3 New Zealanders over that time, but then the size of the radio audience drops significantly after 6 PM. TV's audience builds through the day, and between 6 PM and 8:30 PM reaches more than 4 in 10 New Zealanders and is easily the most popular media during that time. TV's audience drops after 8:30 PM, but it remains the most popular media amongst New Zealanders between 8:30 and 10:30 PM. The size of the audience watching SVOD is relatively consistent between 9 AM and 10:30 PM, reaching approximately 3 in 10 New Zealanders during this time. And between 8:30 PM and 10:30 PM, it competes equally with online video and slightly below TV for the biggest audiences during that period. Music streaming is most popular between 9 AM and 6 PM, and then after that, like radio listening, its audience drops away significantly in the evening. The audience playing online gaming is relatively consistent throughout the day until after 10:30 PM, but before this it attracts between 14 and 20% of New Zealanders in each of those time zones. And on-demand viewing is also very consistent throughout the day, reaching between 7 and 12% of New Zealanders in each zone of the day. So these results show how the media New Zealanders choose to engage with changes throughout the day. And while digital media does attract the overall the biggest audience over the course of the day, there are still important zones when traditional media either attracts the biggest audience or competes very strongly with digital media. So the results I've shown you so far are based on all New Zealanders 15 and over. And of course, media behaviour changes varies significantly between different groups of New Zealanders. And there are some audiences for whom digital media has long been preferred over traditional media. For instance, the media consumption of Asian New Zealanders is significantly different to the overall result, with just 38% of Asian New Zealanders watching TV each day and 84% watching online video each day. So those different subgroups are discussed in detail in the report, but for today I just want to focus on the main differentiator of behaviour, which is age and life stage, and just quickly summarise the different behaviours of the 3 generations of media users. Starting with the youngest age group, which for this study we've defined as 15 to 39-year-olds. So these are the traditional media daily reach amongst 15 to 39-year-olds. So TV and radio reach just over 1 in 3 of this group each day, and that's continued to decline at the same rate since 2018. Online video is the most popular media amongst 15 to 39-year-olds, and with 82% of this audience tuning in each day. But the daily reach of online video has not increased significantly since 2020. SVOD, however, continues to grow its audience amongst 15 to 39-year-olds and at a consistent rate, and now reaches nearly 3/4 of this audience each day. Music streaming attracts the 3rd biggest audience amongst this age group, though it has declined slightly to 68% since 2020. The number of 15 to 39-year-olds playing online gaming has also declined in the last 12 months. And both these trends, music streaming and online gaming, may show that they received a boost amongst this age group during COVID-19 levels 1 and 2. Overall, however, these trends, this impact is minor, and then these trends give us confidence that our conclusions last year were accurate and valid. So on-demand reaches more than 1 in 5 15 to 39-year-olds each day, while the audience listening to podcasts continues to grow amongst 15 to 39-year-olds. So this chart shows the dominance of digital media over traditional media amongst younger New Zealanders. And of course, if I was to show you an even younger age group, say 15 to 24s, then that difference would be even greater. But let's now look at the media use of the middle generation of New Zealanders. So TV remains the most popular media each day amongst 40 to 59-year-olds, reaching 2/3 of this audience. However, the size of that audience has continued to decline, and as has the audience listening to music on physical formats. The radio audience is stable amongst this age group. Online video is also stable amongst 40 to 59-year-olds, reaching slightly fewer than 6 in 10 of this group each day. Similarly, SVOD has not grown its audience amongst 40 to 59-year-olds, reaching slightly less than 1 in 2 New Zealanders in this age group. Streamed music, online gaming, and on-demand all reach about 1/3 of 40 to 59-year-olds, and the audiences using these media is again stable since 2020. And lastly, podcasts reaches 12% of 40 to 59-year-olds each day and is continuing to slowly build its audience amongst this age group. So with the exception of the decline in the TV audience amongst 40 to 59-year-olds, there's actually been little change in audience behaviour amongst this age group in the last 12 months. And this age group continues to demonstrate the widest range of media use between digital and traditional media. Finally, let's look at the media use of the older generation, those aged 60 and over. Amongst this age group, traditional media remains dominant and there's no sign of decline. So TV reaches more than 8 in 10 60-plus-year-olds each day, and 2/3 listen to the radio. Conversely, no digital media reaches more than 1 in 4 60-plus-year-olds each day, and any audience growth in digital media is slow. SVOD and online video are slowly growing in popularity, but it is a much slower rate than in the younger age groups. The remaining digital media reach fewer than 15% of 60-plus-year-olds and are not growing over time. So that summarises New Zealanders' overall media use in 2021 and how that's changing over time. So let's now look at what that means in terms of the audiences using specific channels, sites, and stations. So there are now 3 channels, sites, and stations that reach the equal biggest audience amongst New Zealanders each day. TVNZ1 reaches 4 in 10 New Zealanders each day, along with Netflix, which continues to steadily grow its audience and now reaches 4 in 10 New Zealanders each day. And YouTube, for online video as opposed to listening to music, actually shows a decline in the study to 40%. The decline we're seeing in YouTube is actually matched by a decline in viewing video on Facebook to 30% of New Zealanders as well. So this decline that we're seeing here will be driven by 2 factors. One is the potential for 2020 to have driven a peak in viewing these sites during COVID-19 levels 1 and 2. And the second is the change we needed to make the survey to introduce other online video providers so that we were not previously measuring. And one of those is Instagram. So watching video on Instagram now reaches 1 in 5 New Zealanders each day. So by introducing a number of significant providers to this question, including Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and Twitch, we gave respondents a much wider range to choose from than in the past. And this may have resulted in fewer respondents selecting both YouTube and Facebook when they answered this question. So this change has increased the breadth of our audience measurement, but it may have had a one-off impact on the trends we were measuring over time. And so we're very careful not to make too many changes to our survey and to the way we ask questions. And so they're very consistent from study to study, but there are times when changes are required to match market conditions or keep pace with audience changes in behavior. And this was one of those times. In terms of music streaming, Spotify continues to reach more than 1 in 4 New Zealanders each day, and with YouTube below this reaching 17% of New Zealanders. It's important to note that we're also measuring a decline in the audience listening to music via YouTube in this study, and that trend will not be influenced by the change we made to the online video question. So 3 shows further decline in its daily audience in 2021, and now reaching 1 in 5 New Zealanders each day, while TVNZ2's audience is stable at 14%. TVNZ On Demand reaches 17% of New Zealanders each day, and this is slightly below the audience it reached in 2020. And it suggests that TVNZ On Demand was one site that received a boost in audience during COVID-19 levels 1 and 2. Note that there are no longer any radio stations in the top stations, channels and sites. The most popular radio stations are in the next tier down, with Radio New Zealand National reaching about 1 in 10 New Zealanders each day. TikTok and Stuff for video reach a similar number of similar number of New Zealanders each day. So this chart summarizes the daily reach of the most popular content providers amongst New Zealanders in 2021. So while media use is quite fragmented and it varies significantly between different types of New Zealanders, there are now strong market leaders with large audiences in nearly all categories. The exception is radio, where many stations compete to deliver the biggest audiences. So let's now quickly look at each media type just to see the main providers in each, starting with TV. So as we've seen, TVNZ1 attracts the equal biggest audience of any single channel, site or station, and its audience is largely stable over time. The audience watching 3 and Prime each day continues to slowly decline over time, while TVNZ is stable in 2021. The combined Sky Sport channels, the aggregated view of those channels, shows audience growth since 2020 to 7%. As we discussed last year, the lack of live sport during the survey period in 2020 will have impacted the daily reach, and daily reach fell from 10% to 5% in 2020, and some of that has been regained now in 2021. So let's just now take another look at the daily reach of overseas online video sites. As we've seen, we are measuring a decline in the daily audience watching online video on YouTube and Facebook, following a potential boost in 2020 and after changes were needed to be made to improve the survey. But these 2 providers continue to reach the biggest audiences by a significant margin within this media category. Below these 2, Instagram reaches 1 in 5 each day, while TikTok and Snapchat each reach approximately 1 in 10 New Zealanders each day. So this chart summarizes the daily reach of New Zealand-based online video sites. And so while we now capture online video viewing of New Zealand sites separately, overall usage patterns have not changed. Stuff and New Zealand Herald continue to reach approximately 1 in 10 New Zealanders each day, with TVNZ News, Radio New Zealand, and 3 News below this. The Spin-Off and NZ On Screen reach approximately 1% of New Zealanders with online video each day. This chart summarizes the daily reach of the SVOD category. Netflix dominance of the SVOD category continues to increase, and that's despite growth in audiences watching Disney Plus and the newly merged Neon. 4 in 10 New Zealanders now watch Netflix each day. According to the study, 64% of New Zealanders have access to Netflix, and 22% can access Disney Plus, and 16% can access Neon. There's a slightly different picture when it comes to looking at how New Zealanders listen to the radio, and this is potentially the most fragmented media. So while Radio New Zealand and Newstalk ZB each reach approximately 1 in 10 New Zealanders, there's another 9 stations who reach between 3 and 6% of New Zealanders each day. And then below this, not shown, there's another 8 stations that reach between 1 and 2% of New Zealanders each day. So we can see there's another potential impact of COVID-19 levels 1 and 2 in this data here, in terms of the slight decline in audience reach that we saw in 2020 and which is mostly recovered in 2021. Now, it must be noted that nearly all of those movements are actually within the margin for error. So whilst it may be a COVID-19 related impact, it may also be partially at least driven by sample size. In terms of music streaming, Spotify continues to be the most popular site, reaching more than 1 in 4 New Zealanders each day, followed by YouTube. Below this, Apple Music and iTunes reach 2% of New Zealanders each day. Note that there are many music streaming providers, which we've included in the study, which have again failed to register an audience in this study. Finally, on demand. TVNZ On Demand continues to attract the biggest audience of any on-demand site, reaching 17% of New Zealanders each day. No other on-demand site reaches more than 5% of New Zealanders each day. But as discussed, TVNZ On Demand may be another site showing an impact of COVID-19 on audience behaviour. And in fact, I'd probably say that's the biggest impact that we can see in the study, following its growth in 2020 and falling back slightly in 2021. So the rate of change in terms of how New Zealanders use on demand overall has slowed in 2021. So there's 31% of all New Zealanders who use it exclusively as a primary source of content, compared to the 35% who did so in 2020. But there is a majority of on-demand users who use it either as a primary source of content or as a primary source of content and as a source of catch-up. We should also note that we're measuring a decline in the proportion of New Zealanders who have access to a PVR. So that will mean that over time, more New Zealanders may be needing to use on demand to catch up with something that they missed when it screened live on TV. And finally, let's take a look at where New Zealanders get the news and which source they trust the most. So these results show the proportion of New Zealanders who regularly use each source of news. TVNZ News, both broadcast and online, is the most widely used source of news by a significant margin. And following this, Stuff and New Zealand Herald are the next most widely used. We then ask, which source is New Zealanders' most trusted source of news? And again, TVNZ News is the most trusted by New Zealanders. After this, New Zealand Herald, Stuff, and Radio New Zealand are equally most trusted. And it's encouraging to note that whilst social media is used widely as a source of news, it's trusted the most of all by very few New Zealanders. And that brings us to the end of the summary of insights of the 2021 Where Are the Audiences study. I'll now pass you over to Cam Harland for closing comments, and then we'll take your questions.
Tēnā koutou, no mai haere mai, kia koutou, kua hono mai, ne ke tēnei hui. He mihi aroha tēnei, ki te hunga mā uiui e tēnei wā, kia piki ti ora. Nā mihi nui, kia koutou katoa, e raro o koutou mirimiru. Kia noho homaru, tēnā koutou. Kia ora, everyone. Firstly, let me thank Jeremy for his very fine work, and our research team here at Irarangi Tamoto, led by Alana. Lovely to have you all on the Zoom this morning. Very, very sorry that we can't be doing this in person. I think we were hoping that this year we might. Big shout out to our friends up in Tamaki who are dealing with level 4. Listen, we do this research to inform our strategy, but obviously it's become a pretty significant piece of information. So we do share it with the sector so you can understand the wider context and can see for yourselves where to find the audiences you're targeting. As Jeremy said at the start, we do understand that a number of the people that are listening in today have your own data in relation to your own audiences. But we still believe that this is a very important piece of work for us as an agency that is here to fund important public media content. With the fast-changing media environment, understanding where to find audiences is obviously crucial to the success of the content that we fund. The strength of our funding model is that we're not tied to a particular platform. We can quite literally go to where the audiences are. You may have seen recent examples of content callouts and some funding decisions where we've been planning to reach some of the harder to reach younger audiences that aren't necessarily on the more traditional platforms, going towards digital platforms such as Instagram and TikTok. The strategic balancing act for us, of course, is that we need to ensure we can encourage this kind of innovation, but at the same time maintain a steady as she goes approach for larger mainstream audiences, which is still to be found very much on linear TV, for example, in prime time. We see this year's Where Are the Audiences results as confirming the trends we've been seeing growing over recent years. In other words, no huge surprises here. In addition to the Where Are the Audiences data, we also now have our very own audience and media strategist, Kat Goodwin, who has, amongst other important tasks, a pretty significant job in trying to create a holistic view of audience engagement with funded content, going beyond, for example, the standard TV rating, and being able to make a like-for-like comparison about content across a large range of mediums. So listen, I just, as I say, want to thank Jeremy for his fine work. I also want to thank you all for your time this Friday morning. I'm aware that there are a number of questions that have kind of come through the Q&A, so I'm going to throw across to the lovely Alana, who in turn will throw those questions across predominantly to Jeremy, I'm sure, but I'm here as well. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Cam. Kia ora, Jeremy, for that fantastic presentation again. All of that information is so insightful, and there's a heap more of it as well, so I'll direct you to that shortly. But let's just have a quick look at our questions. They are largely of quite a technical nature, Jeremy, so you're going to be the one in the hot seat. The first question is, between what dates did the fieldwork take place?
That's a very good question. And it's in the
he
report.
gazes off into space.
It's in the report, and I don't know them off the top of my head. It was April through May. And I'm sorry, I should know those dates, but I don't know them off the top of my head. They are in the report on approximately page 2. I could just go off and get them and answer that question.
That's all good. I'm sure they can find that, but yes, I can.
Was it April and May?
April, May. Yeah. Question here, can you please clarify how you differentiate online video, SVOD and NZ On Demand? Are these completely discrete categories?
Absolutely. And we go to great lengths to describe them completely differently in the questionnaire. And we provide examples of the sorts of sites or that we're referring to. So it is really clear in the questionnaire that we're referring to online video and SVOD and on demand as separate media. And again, the detail of how we define those is in the report.
Yeah, there's a categories page at the front of the report that gives you all of that in detail. The next question is, does the research capture consumption of media as a result of non-specific searches via search engines and viewing of social media posts? In other words, what media consumption is there where choices of what will be consumed have been made by others, search algorithms or social media friends?
So I mean, the short answer to that is we don't capture the source of where people find, how people find the content. We just measure what media they're consuming via what providers.
Great, thank you. Next one, another one for you, Jeremy. Kia ora, Jeremy mentioned that Nielsen's consumer media insight data is used in the research. Are some of the questions extracted from there?
No, we just use that to get an estimate of the incidence of landlines in homes. We use the census when we can, but then in between censi, we refer to Nielsen's CMI data to get an estimate of how on landlines, the incidence of landlines is changing over time. That's the only reason we referred to that.
Fabulous, and our very helpful and quick-fingered viewers have come up with the dates of April 27th to May 24th for when the interviewing was conducted. So thanks for our researcher Gabby for jumping in there, and Ruben from Google. So Ruben also has another question, which is, did you see significant differences within the 40 to 59 demo in terms of 40 to 50 versus 50 to 59 in terms of reach, consumption and repertoire?
Not really. The short answer to that is no, not really. I mean, it's a gradual, across the age band, there's a gradual kind of change of behavior. There are some sort of ages where there's a slightly more sharper change, and it's at about the ages of 40 and 60. But typically it's a graduated change. So the 40 to 49s versus the 50 to 59s, it's not a sharp difference at all.
Great, thank you. Now we don't have any further questions at this stage unless anybody's typing one in as we speak, but I don't think so. So as I mentioned, the full report, hang on, there is one, sorry. Maddie, just 1 second, he's put it in chat rather than in the, where are we? Do you consider geographical differences in usage? What are the usage patterns in, e.g. South Auckland?
So yes, we do. We look closely at regional differences, but it is at quite a high level rather than say South Auckland versus the rest of Auckland or the rest of the country. There are certainly some differences in Auckland compared to in some media compared to say particularly the South Island, and again they are highlighted in the report. Mostly those differences are highlighted in the appendices at the back where we profile the usage of different media, but you'll see some regional differences there. The other thing to say is that there is also some ethnic summaries in the report as well, particularly amongst Māori, Pacifica and Asian audiences, so you can see again a combo of those regional and ethnic groups to get a picture there.
Right, thank you. What considerations have been made to address seasonality and differences in media usage at different times of the year?
We don't, is the short answer, because what we do is conduct the survey at the same time every single year, so that we're measuring audience behavior in April, May every year, and we can get changes over time. We do that to avoid seasonal impact, in fact. We would require doing additional surveys every year to get a picture in terms of seasonal differences.
And I think we've also been careful to make sure that timing avoids major holidays like Easter and so forth, which could skew.
Yeah, and we've also done in the past where we've made sure that the school holidays doesn't dominate fieldwork. I think at some years we've even delayed by a week or two to avoid the Olympics, for instance. But yes, and in fact, last year that was one concern we had, because we had to delay the survey by a couple of months because of COVID levels 3 and 4. We wondered a little bit if perhaps we would see a seasonal impact, and I think what we're saying is it's minor, if anything.
Great. There's another question here. Is there any consideration to day of week that the surveys are conducted, e.g. SVOD consumption being at a peak over the weekends?
Yes, so we work very hard in this field work to make sure that we've actually got we do 200 interviews for each day of the week. So there are 200 interviews based on Saturday's consumption and 200 interviews based on Monday's consumption, etc., etc. And each of those samples of 200 is also representative of the country. So again, we're not getting any biases in terms of overweighting interviews by day of the week, or by the fact that some days of the week might not be a representative sample. There's a lot of work goes in behind the scenes to capture, to make sure that sample is representative.
Right. Another question here is regarding the ethnicity breakdowns. Asian's a big group of people. How far do you break down the ethnicity in the report?
No further than that. We just look at it at a higher level like Māori and Pacifica.
Yeah, and if I can just sort of add to that some further work coming from NZ On Air, we've got a piece of qualitative work that we are hoping to release soon that's looking at Chinese and Indian New Zealanders and their media preferences. That's particularly around content. And we also have recently partnered with Niche Media and Read Research to get some data on ethnic viewing and media consumption patterns as well. So we do have more information that's additional to where the audience is, and particularly that qualitative piece we will have out soon. So we hope that will be really useful, particularly to content makers. I am just having a quick look to see if there are any further questions, and I don't think there are, and we are coming towards the end of our time. So as I mentioned, the full report's on our website. It's the top item on the research page. There you'll also find 4 additional deep dive reports, and they look at the 15 to 24 age group, Pacifica, Māori and lower socioeconomic households. And I'd like to thank the Health Promotion Agency who partner with us to fund these additional reports. Also, big thanks to Sophie Howard, who behind the scenes has been running this webinar for us today and created our beautiful infographics, which are available on that research page as well. If there's anything else we can help with, or if we didn't get to your question, or if you didn't manage to get it into us, fire it through on communications at nzonair.govt.nz and we'll get back to you. Stay safe and well, everybody. Ka kite.
Ka kite. Thanks all.